Hello folks, welcome to this video, and here I'm going to be talking about the 2019 Formula 1 World Championship, the 21 race calendar that took us all around the globe once again. It was a year of such triumph and celebration, as well as such heartbreak and tragedy, and bear in mind that at some point in this video I may be talking about some things that people might find distressing or disturbing. I mean, even pre-season to this, on the eve of the Australian Grand Prix, Charlie Whiting passed away. So without further ado, let's get on with this. Let's talk about the season. And hopefully, I can try and make this as close to 20 minutes as possible. I don't want to keep you here all day listening to me talk. You can also find timestamps down below, as well as links to any videos I've done over the course of the season. The championship started off, as usual, in Australia, and we had a few questions as the season got underway. The first one was, where was Ferrari? Ferrari seemed to be quite strong in pre-season testing, and of course, naturally, the Mercedes drivers were starting to concede that maybe Ferrari might challenge. But they didn't. Bottas 2.0 was born. The bearded gentleman showed up and absolutely dominated the race, saying a message to whom it may concern. And even then, outside of the Mercedes 1-2, Verstappen was third, which was fantastic for Honda. On their first race with Red Bull, they managed to get a podium. I really wouldn't have wanted to be Fernando Alonso at that time. Then we moved on to Bahrain, and it looked like it could be Ferrari actually challenging Mercedes. It looked like we could actually be seeing a kind of four-horse race with two of the prancing horses involved, as they locked out the front row. However, it wasn't to be. In the middle of the race, Vettel and Hamilton got into some close battles that led to Seb spinning. Then later, a blown cylinder for Leclerc ruined any chance of his maiden Grand Prix win from his maiden pole position. And you have to feel sorry for him. You really do, and I still do now. We moved on to China, and it was the 1000th official Formula 1 race. Again, the Mercedes seemed to be an incredibly powerful car, as we saw all of the rookies having interesting weekends. George Russell still getting used to the Williams, Lando Norris continuing his run as the meme lord by getting torpedoed and doing a Shooting Stars parody, and then Alex Albon crashing into the wall, destroying the Toro Rosso, starting from the pit lane and ended up finishing in the points. But then we went to Baku, and with Leclerc seeming to be quite a good challenge to Mercedes. But in qualifying, he crashed in the castle section. In the race, it was the Mercedes out in front. However, it was Bottas leading Hamilton home this time. Of course, this would switch back around for Spain, but even then, it seemed like it was going to get more and more cases of Mercedes dominance over the course of this season. And then Monaco came around, and Niki Lauda had passed away. Niki was multiple-time Formula 1 World Champion, and close to many people in the paddock had worked with teams such as Jaguar, which has since become Red Bull, of course Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton drove home a strong victory in Monaco, and regardless of what we think of Mercedes dominance or anything like that, I don't think there was anybody who was like, yeah, I didn't want this to happen, because it was dedicated to Niki. We saw the liveries changing, we saw the cap being hung up in the garage. We then went across to North America, where it was the first massive debate of the season, as Sebastian Vettel lost the race win with a penalty. This was for what we called a dangerous re-entry onto the circuit, seeming to push Lewis Hamilton into the wall, though it was also argued he wasn't in control of the car as it came on from the grass. Of course, people loved it. We started to see some kind of excitement in Formula 1, as Seb picked up the first place and moved it away from Lewis's car to where his car should have been, though he had parked it elsewhere in Parc Fermé. And it seemed like we might be seeing some very interesting things happen in F1 this season. Then we went to France, and, well, that didn't really seem to be. Mercedes were quite strong all through the weekend. Sebastian Vettel, after struggling through the race, ended up picking up the fastest lap at the end with a little bit of what we call Code F. Not Code F to pay respects, Code Fastest Lap, apparently. But then after what had been a dull race, we had an incredibly exciting one in Austria. Mercedes was struggling, as they have done before the circuit. However, what it meant was there was a massive focus on two stars of the future absolutely scrapping away right until the end. Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. And it was a last lap lunge that ended up deciding the race. Well, not last lap, but you get what I'm saying. It started to show a bit of a change in how Michael Massey was leading as race director. And it was something that was actually quite interesting. It was something that I quite enjoyed. It was also, of course, quite significantly for Honda, their first win since 2006. And it meant that we started to think, are there actually more than just two engine suppliers battling for the race win? I mean, the answer now is obviously yes, but it started to prove everybody wrong, everybody who doubted Honda, as they started to win their races now. We then went to Britain, and it was actually the stuff off the track that probably got more attention than the stuff on the track. Rich Energy, the sponsors of Haas, were so annoyed, supposedly, with their performance in Austria, where they finished behind the Williamses, that they announced that they were ending the sponsorship immediately. Then this ensued this whole story, this whole Williams story, if we so shall say, in which apparently an intern did it, and so they got fired, and it turned out the intern was actually the CEO, William Story, and then it turned out that, well, it wasn't really a firing, it was more of an ousting or a coup or whatever, and then he was going to be back with lightning bolt or whatever. But either way, Haas had probably quite a drive to survive weekend now that we think about it. Romain Grosjean spun in the pit lane in practice and destroyed the front wing, and on the first lap of the race, going out of the village section, the two drivers collided. There were also other collisions. Vettel accidentally punted Max Verstappen going into the club corner. And yeah, that didn't exactly bode well for either of them. However, we then went on to Germany, which I would still say is the race of the season for me. 125 years of Mercedes, which didn't exactly bode well for them, as Lewis Hamilton ended up picking up a penalty for doing something very much akin to what he did in 2018, and then Bottas on the wet surfaces in this treacherous red dry race, which made it so exciting. Oh god, do we actually need Bernie sprinklers? Ended up going off in the first corner. There are also other kinds of stories as well. We saw a Ferrari off in the stadium section. This time it was Leclerc instead of Vettel. We saw Vettel start in P20 and go to P2. It was absolutely magnificent drive from him. We also saw the Torpedo get into P3. The first time this season we saw somebody not in the top 3 teams on the podium, and it was Daniel Kvyat. And that's got to be a redemption arc in itself. Not only the second podium for Toro Rosso, but he was also on the podium with a Red Bull winner in Max Verstappen, and the first ever Toro Rosso podium sitter in Sebastian Vettel. And of course, elsewhere on the track there were other stories. Robert Kubica got what was to be his and Williams' only point of the season, as the Alphas got disqualified for what was seen to be a mimicking of launch control. Then we went on to Hungary, and It was again quite an exciting race in some regards. Much like in Austria, we saw new precedents being set. We stopped seeing people just gaming for the undercut and doing the one-stop strategy, as Lewis Hamilton took a risk on a two-stop strategy. Of course, he was criticised his team a lot of the time during it, but he ended up winning the race, as Verstappen's tyres faded towards the end of it. Of course, Max became the 100th pole sitter at this race, but he still did manage to convert it from a pole to a win. Though there were a couple of other good points. Carlos Sainz, for example, more impressed with this P5 than the one he got in Germany, where he felt he could have gotten a podium, started singing. And then a shock announcement over the start of the summer break came in that Pierre Gasly was being dropped by Red Bull, being moved back to Toro Rosso, and Alexander Albon was getting the promotion. And as we got towards the second half of the season, we could only imagine what was going to come next. We were wondering what kind of battles there were going to be, if Max was going to be in a title fight. But then we got to the Belgian Grand Prix, and the ugly side of motorsport reared its head, and the tragedy of it hit home, and hit hard. On the 31st of August, after Formula 1's qualifying, Formula 2 hosted its feature race. On the second lap, as the pack went through Eau Rouge and up Raidillon, a crash enveloped a large amount of the field. The red flags were brought out as two drivers had to be extracted from their cars. One was Juan Manuel Correa, who is still fighting today to get back into racing condition. He was placed into a coma following the accident. The other one was Antoine Hubert, who was killed. Antoine was well respected throughout the paddock in F2, F3 and F1, being what was the final champion for GP3 before its rebranding for this season. He was also a good friend of many F1 drivers such as Ocon, Gasly and Leclerc. He was a Renault Junior, which meant that he was expected to be vying for a Renault race seat in the not too distant future. And he'll be sorely missed. We then had another close call on the Sunday during the F3 race, with Simo Laaksonen going off towards the end of the lap. Luckily, without any major injuries. And whilst the weekend ended up seeing Charles Leclerc bring home his first win in Formula 1, there was no mood for celebration. Charles dedicated it to his friend Antoine. And no matter how wonderful it seemed that Leclerc had finally won a race, it was something hard for us to sit down and watch. The standing ovations on lap 19 and the flooding in of people on Twitter helped make the pain a little bit easier. Onwards we went to Monza. And we usually call it the F1 circus, and luckily there was some comic relief in it. In qualifying 3, in the aim to try and get the best tow and the best slipstream, the final 10 cars all bunched up, trying to get the perfect tow, and most of them didn't end up making a flying lap. It meant that Leclerc was starting right up at the top again, and was able to convert it into a second successive win. Also bringing home the first Ferrari win in front of the Tifosi for nearly a decade. Meanwhile, Vettel didn't exactly have the best race, spinning out early on after a battle which ended up nearly causing a massive crash for Lance Stroll. Though it was Leclerc's day. The Italian Grand Prix was definitely Leclerc's day. He drove a very strong race start to finish and even got involved in some massively strong battles with Lewis Hamilton, which did get him a black and white flag, but it showed that he knew what tough racing was. Onwards we went then to Singapore, and off the track, Haas ended things with rich energy. On the track, Leclerc got his third pole position in a row. And then Ferrari suddenly had a strategy thing happen. Sebastian Vettel managed to get the undercut to work and brought home his first win in a year and a half. And you have to feel really happy for him doing that. Matteo Binotto has since said it was something they had to do to restore his faith and confidence in himself and in the team. And you understand where they're coming from with that. In the next race for Russia, Leclerc got pole again, making that 4 in a row, meaning that he was the best person in terms of that streak since the Michael. However, Vettel got the best at the start and was leading up until the energy recovery system blew up, causing him to ask us to bring back the V12s. Though I don't think Ferrari would want to bring back the V12s, it wasn't exactly a good era for them. This, coupled with some bad timing from Ferrari strategy in Leclerc's pit stop, meant that Mercedes' dominance went on to past 106 years at the Russian Grand Prix. Next time out in Japan, they would take the Constructors' title, as Charles Leclerc would punt Max Verstappen into the first corner, meaning that he's been hit by both the Ferraris now. There was also Brakegate. This was as Renault earned themselves a disqualification for being seen to have some kind of automatic adjustment to the brakes and the brake bias and the brake settings. Cyril Unbeatable didn't want to say how long it had been on the car, though Romain Grosjean has said it's as early as 2015. As we then went towards Mexico, we saw a renaming for Toro Rosso as AlphaTauri for next season. On track, Max ended up with a lot of attention. Firstly, for a penalty following Bottas's crash at the end of Q3, because he said that he saw yellow flags and just decided, I'm going to go for the fastest lap. He then ended up picking up a puncher for getting very argy-bargy with Bottas. And late in the race, Sebastian Vettel went on a charge to try and catch up with Lewis Hamilton, but Lewis brought it home. And next time out in America, he would bring it home for his 6th world title. Though Bottas was to win the race, his first win, as we can pretty much see here, since Baku. And it was well done. But yet again, it seemed like it was too little too late to challenge for the title. Next time out in Brazil was probably the second best race of the season. It had the most action right at the end, with all of the safety cars coming in from things such as the Ferraris crashing into each other. And also the potential for a Honda 1-2-3 until Lewis Hamilton passed, well, in not so great circumstances, Alexander Albon. Not so great circumstances as in ones that earned him a penalty. Meaning that instead of it being a potential Honda 1-2-3, it ended up being Max Verstappen winning again. Pierre Gasly getting his first podium in second place, meaning the Toro Rosso finished their time having gotten a first, second and third. And, well, third place, it went to a smooth operator. And yes, I did a bad parody of a song. But yes, Sainz got his first podium. And honestly, after the kind of season he's had, he deserved his first podium with McLaren. Abu Dhabi was a much quieter race to end off the season, and to potentially end off the careers for 2 drivers, Nico Hülkenberg and Robert Kubica, who will make way for Esteban Ocon and Nicolas Latifi. Lewis brought home a Grand Slam, but after what we had in Brazil, I don't think anything was going to get close to it in terms of energy. And well, that's that. We've just hit the 20-minute mark. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for joining me. If you did enjoy this, make sure to hit the like button. Even if you don't agree with what I said, because if you didn't agree with what I said, put that in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. You can hit the subscribe button if you want to stay in the loop for more motorsport news and content and sim racing stuff. And yeah, just thank you for getting through to this part. It means a lot to me. Goodbye for now.